I want to just talk to you about shower trays, because we've had a little bit of correspondence on shower trays. We've been backwards and forwards between unhappy customers who have got cracked shower trays, and we've also been talking to manufacturers, and I've been talking to a few installers to try and solve a few disputes, try and act, if you like, as the middleman between the disgruntled customer and the installer. And what I found is that there are a few simple errors that people are making with shower trays. So let's just clarify what I'm talking about here. I'm actually talking about the resin cast shower trays, which are basically a piece of concrete, if you like. They're a tray which might have a waste hole in the middle, or they might have a waste hole at one end. They may also have a linear waste. That's basically a long channel that drains the water from across the tray. So if the tray were like this, for example, you may have that linear drain at the end. It would probably have a hole in it somewhere there where the waste goes in. Sometimes it might even be at one end. The idea is that obviously when you order a shower tray, you want to work out what kind of waste you want. Now here's one of the problems that we encounter. We want to put our shower tray down and we've got joists. So we've got floor joists which are running under the shower tray. So we've got to position that shower tray in such a way that our waste hole misses the floor joist, because what we don't want to do is be cutting through those floor joists and weakening them. So there's a little bit of preparation, a little bit of surveying, if you like, to be done, and it's not always easy because you're going into a bathroom, you're just doing an estimate, and you don't want to start pulling up floor coverings and things like that. So you just have to try and work out which way the joists are running and work from there. Here's a clue. So you've got a house which is semi-detached. Now, it's very unlikely that the floor joists are going to run that way in the house, because if they ran that way, you would have to let the floor joists into the wall here. That would be your neighbour's wall. So if you were letting a floor joist in, they were letting a floor joist in, you'd have to stagger those floor joists. And one of the problems you would then get, so that is your fire defence. That's your perfect party wall, if you like, or whatever, between the two houses. That's built of brick or block or whatever it's built of. But if you start letting joists in, if you start cutting sockets or laying the joists onto that wall there, you will find that fire can spread a lot easier between the two buildings, because you've got joist ends which are burning there and they're meeting joist ends which are burning there. You also get problems with sound transmission because people have got a joist going through there. Best will in the world, when they put the mortar around the joist, it shrinks slightly, sometimes it falls out, so sometimes you get a gap, an air gap going through from one property to another, and where you've got an air gap you get sound transmission. So we're going to be doing something on sound transmission at a later date. So it's much more likely that if you've got a house like that, that all the joists are running front to back, that you're not getting any sideways joists. So there's a clue. When you go up into the house, you can very often see that the joists are all running normally at 400 centres. So if you find your first joist, you can more or less work out where the other joists are go. And of course you can also see if you've got floorboards, because you've got screws in there, and you can just see exactly where those floorboards are laid. The floorboards will be running that way, so the joists will be running counter to it. So you see what I'm talking about? We have to work out where that waste is going to fall, and if it's going to fall on a joist, we order a different type of tray. We order a tray which has got a corner waste or a waste in some other position, so that we can miss the joist. And if we can't do that, sometimes what we do is we move the tray out slightly so that we miss the joist, and then we build a false wall so that it's just made sense of it. But there's a lot of jiggery pokery there to be done just to make that work. So by far and away the most usual thing is to have a waste at one end. So here we've got our little trap. That's going to be sitting in level. We're going to get the top of that shower tray level, get the spirit level out, and we'll just make sure that that shower tray is level. We put our spirit level along here, we put our spirit level along there, and we make sure that the tray is level on both sides. That tray is going to have a slope. It's going to be thick at one end And because this waste is set down here somewhere, we need that tray to fall. So you can see that we've got a nice thick section of tray there, but we've got a thin section of tray there, just at that waste where we're going to be cutting a hole in the tray, where the manufacturers have cut a hole in the tray, not us. So where the manufacturers have cut a hole in the tray, at that very point, we've got the thinnest part of the tray. So you can see a problem arising there. Now, it's made even worse because what people now want is what we call a low profile tray. It's a tray that is actually a lot thinner. There's no heavy section on the side of it because people don't want to be stepping over it, stepping into it. If possible, they want to lay it flush with the floor tiles so that they can just step seamlessly between the floor and the tray. Very nice, I love that. But it does mean that this tray is thinnest at its weakest point. And when I say thin, it gets very, very thin indeed. Now, these are concrete resin, basically. This thing is set on a piece of concrete. The concrete goes into the mold. It's got resin with it to strengthen it, and then they put an acrylic cap on the top of it, which is basically a heat process, and they just stick that thing down onto the tray. What you see on the top is joined to the concrete base, but they're two different materials. So how well are those two materials stuck together? Well, okay, really, not too badly. But sometimes you get a problem where you get a delamination. You start getting a bubble in that acrylic cap because it's parted company with the concrete. That happens sometimes, but it's not that common. What is very, very common is for you to get a hairline crack across the tray. Now people say, oh, well, that was damaged in transit, it was a fault of a manufacturer, it was this, it was that, it was the other. But it's very, very likely to be because of the installation. This particular tray that I'm talking about earlier in the week had chipboard flooring underneath it. So in other words, the plumber's come in, he's seen the chipboard flooring, the house isn't that old, and he's thought, okay, I'm going to lay my tray straight onto the chipboard flooring. Now that, to me, is not a good idea because chipboard is a little bit springy, it's a little bit flexy, and I prefer to take up that chipboard flooring. Okay, it takes half an hour to take it up, but you cut that up with your little track saw and your multi-tool, and you get rid of that chipboard floor back to the joist, and then you lay in 18mm plywood. But you've got a nice stout piece of plywood going all the way through there, and you screw that down, and if possible you put a few noggins between the joists. So you've got a joist here and you've got a joist here, put a noggin in between it that comes up to the top there, and that supports the plywood even better. So you do everything that you can to make that a very, very solid base for your tray to go on. And then the manufacturers recommend, in the most part, that you lay it on a lean mix of sand and cement, no more than 6 to 1. You know, it's 6 parts of sand to 1 part of cement. Even an 8 to 1 isn't too bad. Comb out your floor. First of all, you put your plywood on, and then maybe you put a bit of primer on the plywood, and maybe you don't. It doesn't matter that much, because all you're looking to do is comb a bed of sand and cement through, and I use a notch trowel so you've got a little bit of give in it, and then you can sit your tray down onto the plywood. And that tray, if you level it through, get your spirit level out, just give it a very gentle tap down on one side or another with the palm of your hand, but you can just level that tray in as you go. I sometimes use a little bit of fairy liquid in the sand and cement. I sometimes use plasticizer if I've got it, but it's only doing a supporting job. It's not meant to stick the tray to the floor. Now therein lies the problem, because a lot of plumbers say, well, it doesn't stick the tray down. I need something to stick the tray down because I don't want the tray moving around. If they stick the tray down, they go and get some rapid set tile adhesive. Instead of the sand and cement, they comb a bed of rapid set tile adhesive through. And this young plumber that I was talking to said to me, yeah, I use a whole bag of it. I really go to town. I do a great job on it. Oh yeah, of course you do. Now, the problem there is that you've got a piece of concrete underneath, which has got no real tensile strength, really. You could probably just get the thing and snap it. It is inclined to break if you put any force on. And the whole idea of putting your sand and cement base on is that you give that even support. That piece of concrete slab, if you like, has got absolutely even support across the whole area. Very, very important. If you have that even support and you put that tray on and you give it a little bit of time to go off, there should be no problem. If you use a tile adhesive, that tile adhesive is very, very good at sticking things. That's why it's called tile adhesive. You know, the clue's in the name. It grabs the floor and it also grabs the back of the tray. And even if it's flexible tile adhesive, that flexible tile adhesive will still have a very strong bond between the floor and the tray. So if you get a little bit of movement in the floor, which you tend to do, buildings dry out, buildings change, chipboard, anything like that is not very good. But let's suppose we put a really strong bit of ply down there and we've done the best job we can. It's unlikely we're going to get any movement from the floor, but we can't rule it out. If we get any movement on that floor, and we're talking about a fraction of a millimetre, let's talk about something like, say, 0.5 millimetre of movement, of flexing in that floor somewhere. And you think about that, that can happen even with the seasons drying out and, you know, humidity changing in the house, say. We've got a situation where that floor moves very, very slightly. We've got a tray which is made of concrete with a resin cap. We know already that it's got a weak point there. That tray is not able to just move on its own. It actually is like a massive tile. It's like a, you know, if that was a, say, 1,000 millimeters by 800 tray, that's a big tile. You think about that. If you laid that tile down with tile adhesive, you'd be slightly concerned. You get away with it if it's a porcelain tile and it was very good, it would be fine. But this is only a bit of concrete. This isn't anywhere near as strong as a porcelain tile. It doesn't have any ability to flex, and it should not be flexed, because as soon as it's flexed, you're going to get a crack appearing. So very often the reason you're getting a crack is because you've laid it on tile adhesive rather than sand and cement. Now, if you want to lay it on tile adhesive because you want to get on with a job, there is a way of doing it. And the way to do it is to lay your tile adhesive down, take the piece of polythene that your tray was wrapped in, or anything else you can find, lay the polythene over the top of the tile adhesive, bed your tray down on top of the polythene, and on the underside of the tray, all the way around the edge of the tray, you'll see that there's a kind of a channel there, and that channel will push up into the edges of the tray around there, but of course it'll be covered with the polythene, so it won't grab the tray, and that will form that little channel and it'll stop that tray from sliding around. But the other thing that I always do, where the tray fits up against the wall, you've got a wall here, I always put silicone seal along there, silicone seal all the way along the edge, so when you put that tray in, it just attaches it to the wall, it holds it to the wall. What I normally do is bed the thing in there first, get it absolutely bedded in there first, and then just ease it very slightly away from the wall, and then squirt that bit of silicone down there against that wall, That's our first line of defense. That's going to stop, once that silicone goes off, it's going to stop that tray moving around. Believe me, it will. So you don't need to worry about sticking the tray down. You've got the tray absolutely beautifully supported on your rapid set adhesive. You've got an uncoupling or decoupling membrane, if you like, that piece of polythene or anything else you want to use under there to separate out the tile adhesive from the tray to make sure that it doesn't grab the back. So if anything happens to that sub base, anything happens to that shower tray, you're putting water in it, it's you know, getting a bit of heat, it may expand and contract, but it's able to do it independently of the substrate, and that's a very, very important thing. So we do that, and the other thing that we do is when we put that waste in, we follow the manufacturer's instructions to the letter. I've already talked about these horrible wastes that we've got, which have just basically got a weir and they've got 2 screws, one there and one there, and that's it. That's your plug hole basically, if you like, supported, held down onto a rubber gasket which is underneath the tray, and that rubber gasket is pushing up on the underside of the tray, and you just put a screw in either side, and that is supposed to make a watertight seal. Well, it probably does to a certain extent, but plumbers worry about these kind of things and they like to do a bit of a belt and braces job. And one thing you do see people doing is they put that rubber seal underneath and they put a nice squirt of silicone all the way around the rubber seal. Now that underside of that tray, where that waste goes on, where that plug hole is, if you like, that should be absolutely smooth. That should have been finished off, sanded down. So just have a look at it. And those rubber seals are so squashy, they're so big that there's really no need to put down silicone. And the silicone sometimes even does more harm than good, because what it does is it lubricates the rubber. It's not dry, it's wet. You're screwing the waste down, and as you screw the waste down, you've got a wet surface there which allows that rubber seal to squeeze out. It allows it to move as you tighten. So I would always say put that seal in there absolutely dry, and you don't need to worry about silicone so long as you've got good contact with that seal, and tighten those screws up to exactly what the manufacturer recommends. Or in my case, I get a McAlpine one, which is basically, there's your waste and there's a piece that goes in there which has got a screw thread on it, and that goes down. It's got a bit of a lip there, that will go down. There's the waste coming out. It goes something like that. As I say, I'm a terrible artist, but basically that screw thread there is screwing down into the other one, so you're getting an absolutely even seal. So instead of having this, which I consider to be a piece of rubbish, you've got a nice even seal all the way round, and it's forming the perfect seal. You don't get problems with that because that rubber underneath is doing the job. So supposing we've got the tray here and we've got that threaded section going down into it, and the threaded section is going nice and deeply inside the trap anyway, so the water's in the trap. That threaded section is going down there, so we've got a rubber seal on the bottom here, and we've got that threaded section going down into there. So as the water comes down, it goes straight through there. It can't leak. It's going to go straight into the tray. Anything that went round the side here would actually be caught by that rubber seal there. There's no way that the water is going to trickle along the tray into there and out there. So you do get people who think, okay, I'm going to put a bit of silicone on the under edge of here just to make sure that I've got a seal there so that it doesn't go. But in actual fact, that's totally unnecessary. That bit of seal there is not needed, and what it does do is it makes it difficult to undo. If you ever wanted to get that out and have a look underneath, it's difficult to do. Whereas if you leave it without a silicone seal there, you can unscrew the top, you can push the waste down inside the floor void, and you can very often with a camera or a torch or something see if there's any leak there. So if you do see a wet patch on the ceiling, very often you can have a look down, see what's going on, and you know exactly what you got to do. But obviously when the tray's in and you do get any problems, the only real way to get to them is up from the ceiling below. But you know, that's not the end of the world. Ceilings can be repaired, and they can be invisibly repaired if you get a good plasterer on the job. All is not lost, but what I would say is take care of that situation, take care of the way you put that waste in, and you shouldn't have any problem. Now the other thing that this plumber did, which rang alarm bells, now I wasn't out to say, oh madam, you've got cowboy plumbers in there. I wasn't going around dissing his job, because he did a good job. The other thing that he did is he used plasterboard around the shower enclosure. Now anybody that's watched any of my videos will know that when you've got a wet area, you've got a shower tray and you've got a wall there, and you're going to tile the wall, or you're going to put paneling on the wall, or whatever else you do, putting plasterboard behind it is a little bit of a problem. Now you can do it if you use moisture resistant plasterboard and you tank it. That's what's required in the British Standard. In other words, you put a membrane, whether it's a paint on membrane or a stick on membrane, you can actually coat the plasterboard with something to make it waterproof. But of course, the guys don't want to do that because they want to get on. They don't want to be in there with a blooming brush doing that or stuff. They just want to shove the walls up, put their tray in, and then get the tiler in to do the tiling. But there is a problem. This guy was saying, oh, we use good adhesive, we use good grout, I don't get problems. Don't you really? Well, that's okay, because I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times. A little bit of water gets in there, a little bit of water gets in where the shower valve is or anywhere else, and it trickles down and it causes a problem. The other thing, of course, you get is you've got tiles here and you get water seeping in there. So if water seeps in there, it gets into the plasterboard, it makes the plasterboard into mush, and before you know where you are, you've got tiles falling off the wall, you've got damp stains underneath, you've got problems. Never ever go for just plain plasterboard. It just isn't good enough. It's not allowed. The British standards don't allow it. It just isn't a good job. Now, this young lad said to me, well, I use plasterboard, and he wasn't even using moisture resistant plasterboard, but he was using plasterboard, and he said, the reason I use plasterboard is, he said, because that tile backer board is so expensive, and he said it's going to add a couple of £100 to the job, and I'm not going to get the job all the time. I don't want to lose work, and I'm on a tight price and everything else. And I'm going, really? I've never come across that all the time that I've been out. And I wouldn't say I was a salesman. I'm just somebody that just tries to tell the customer how it is. And what I say to the customer is, look, I'm going to put tile backer board there because tile backer board is the best way of doing the job. Now, whether it's the stuff I use, which is Elements board, which isn't too expensive, it's made in Yorkshire, it's British made product, and it's very, very good. But if you don't want to use that, you could use Vedi, you could use Schluter, you could use Hardy Back, you could use Aqua Panel, Canal's Aqua Panel. There's loads and loads of different tile backer boards around now that you could use, but they all have this advantage of being waterproof. So all you got to do is seal up the joints with a bit of tape. When that tray goes in, seal down on the face of the tile backer board onto the tray itself. Now, that piece of tape, the stuff I use, No More Leaks tape, it's a little bit difficult to apply, but there are plenty of other ones around that you can use. And the idea of that is that you've got that flexible seal between the wall and the shower tray. And believe me, if you've got that, it doesn't matter how much water you put in it. You could put a fire hose on it, because we know showers are getting more powerful now, but you can do what you like. You will not get a leak through there. We also put the tiles on top of the tile backer board with a good quality adhesive, and we use a flexible grout on it, so we've got every line of defense we possibly can. And then the last thing we do, we put in a nice bead of silicone. But that bead of silicone is going to degrade, it's going to get dirty, it's going to get moldy probably, and it's probably going to have to be renewed in 5 years or 10 years time. But no big deal, you just scrape it out, renew it, and put some fresh silicone in. But that silicone isn't really doing the job. The critical job is being done by this seal at the back of the tiles and not at the front of the tiles. So even if you got rid of all that silicone all the way around the bottom, as some people actually do because they don't like the mold, you've still got a very, very good line of defense behind the tiles that's stopping you from having any leaks. Now, I said on my videos before that this is a national problem that we've got. This occurs time and time again, insurance claim after insurance claim, callback after callback, and people have sometimes had this job done 2 or 3 times in their house, and the people haven't been able to get it right. The guys that they've employed, the professionals they've employed to come in and do this job, haven't managed to do it. So this young lad saying that he's losing jobs or would lose jobs if he put 250 quid on for the tile backer board, I just say to the customers, that is what I'm quoting for, that's what I'm going to fit. I won't guarantee the job if you just want plasterboard or anything like that. You must have the tile backer board on those walls to do the job properly. If you don't want that, then probably I'm not your guy. Go for that other guy. Go for that cheaper quote. But if you get that cheaper quote, ask them what they're going to put on the wall, because if they're not going to do a proper job, if they're not going to tank it, or they're not going to use a tile backer board, then you know something about that guy. You know he's cutting corners, he's trying to save pennies, he's making the assumption on behalf of other people. He's deciding whether that 250 quid is the deal breaker or not. And I would say it never is. It really isn't, because if you're spending 5, 10, 15,000, I do bathrooms for 15,000 quid, and if you're spending spending that kind of money on them, putting in a bit of tile backer board is not going to break the bank, believe me. You've got a job which is built to last and will save any problems in the future. Sand and cement, or if you don't use sand and cement, put an uncoupling layer between the tile adhesive and the tray. Don't stick those trays down. Put your proper tile backer board in there, seal the joints up properly. Don't forget to put your plywood underneath and make sure that floor is rock solid. You know, jump up and down on it. Just remember that we may have an 18 stone person in that shower tray. We may have 2 people in the shower tray. We've got to engineer this so that it causes 0 callbacks, 0 problems. So I'm Roger Bisbee. I know I ranted a little bit, I got a bit carried away there maybe, but I really do care about this because I've seen this so many times and I really wish it would stop. Come back to Skill Builder soon, see us again, we'll have more for you. And if you like the channel, you want to help us grow, please just watch another video because that's the best thing you can do. If you can like this video, that also helps us. Share it because that gets us up the rankings on YouTube and we want more viewers. We always want more. We're greedy.